Let's start a little lighthearted, shall we? I'm going to call this section of stories No More Room because I've been playing with this idea of making room all through Advent. That phrase kind of captured my attention because it plays out of the story that we know so well where someone always says, there's no room in the inn. And then we find that somehow in some other space that's made available, Mary and Joseph find shelter anyway, and the whole world makes room for an infant savior. I'm starting out with some literal instances of not wanting to or not being able to make room to fit all of Christmas in. And I'm going to begin with some stories from a friend group that grew out of this church many years ago. We're still in touch with a lot of them, called SMAC, Saturday Morning Athletic Club. My husband was and is a founding member of SMAC, and this group of guys who got together once and then twice a week to play disc golf also like to do social things. And so they instituted a white elephant Christmas night. And if you understand about white elephants, it's just kind of this random gift exchange where you aren't supposed to spend a lot of money. You can or cannot put a lot of thought into it, but you just bring something that's kind of an oddball gift. You leave yours, and you're going to take home someone else's oddball item. Well, SMAC made this the most competitive white elephant exchange I've ever been a part of. Like over a number of years, we amped it up every year. First, it was just weird. I mean, plain the weirdest stuff you could find. Then it got to be like very large and hard to manage. And the rules of the game were, if you got the item, you had to take it to your home and display it somewhere. It had to be there. If anybody dropped by, it's got to be out. So in the early years of our white elephant, I did things like, I dug through all of our wedding gifts, which by now are already pretty old, and I found like weird gag gifts that people had given me, and I passed them on. My favorite was this ceramic plate with a picture of a bride and groom, and it said like Don and Jay, and then it was crossed out, and it said Rick and Jay. And then on the back, and then that one was crossed out, and on the back it had some other people's names because it had just been passed around to all the couples, including Jay twice, evidently. So I just like marked it out and put like your name here. May your love be blessed. Go. Then in retaliation, a minister here at the time, Fester Coffee Pros, he got the plate, and so he decided he would go to Salvation Army, Goodwill, and find like the most hideous thing he can find. I need to cue the visual image of what Fester brought. They're so scary, y'all. They're 3 feet tall, and the choir boy that he brought to White Elephant, it was missing an eye. Like 100% creepy. That one went home with our art teacher, our high school art teacher friend, now a school administrator, because he thought he could somehow patch up that eye and like actually incorporate it into his family's Christmas. God bless him, I don't know. But by far the most memorable gift, and I checked this out with some friends over coffee this week to make sure, am I remembering that this really happened? Yeah, cue the next slide. It was this giant dog. That is a life-size human behind a dog. I got this picture from the Walmart.com website where the same dog is still available, and on the shirt it says, "I'm sorry." Because the dog is supposed to be the way you apologize to a loved one if you've really messed up. Well, somehow, I don't even know, I got the dog in the exchange. It was maybe folded smaller. It maybe seemed like a more manageable idea, but it Jack in the Boxed out, and here's the dog. So I left it in the host home, I thought quite cleverly. I found a storage area where I thought they wouldn't go and left the dog on premises. Well, the next week I open up my office door and there's the dog. And if you've been in the church offices, they're like 10 by 10 squares. It's a very small office. It's a very big dog. And so rules of the game, like now it's mine. I can't get rid of it. So I gave it to Mother's Day out. Poor dear Mother's Day out. Good sports that they were for receiving the dog. The children loved it. The adults hated it. And I'll just notice that years later, when Amy Anderson opened our early childhood center, the dog didn't make the cut. Because sometimes there's just no more room. Okay. That was fun. There is one more. Oh, yeah. I have one more short anecdote to share from some of our friends. This is just too classic not to be passed along. Mary, Lynn, and Roger Smith were in that time of life when your kids are kind of young, they go to bed earlier than you, and then you do all the last minute Christmas prep after your kids are asleep. So they're just doing the parts that Santa doesn't do, and they're working in their own bedroom because you don't want to wake the kids back up. You want all the noise limited to one area. And so they're busily, assembling things, some assembly required. And then they realize their mistake sometime in the wee hours. They've assembled a basketball goal in a bedroom. And they couldn't get it back out of the house. So they had to disassemble it, remove it, and reassemble it. Sometimes there's just no room. What more can I say? We've made it to Act 2. I'm calling this section Maybe Room, and I'm going to introduce it with a picture of a holiday meal and table, because there is like this alternate title for the stories in Act 2. They could be known or thought of as Rearranging the Table. So first story happens to my brother and my parents. I have a younger brother who's 4 years younger than me, and I had moved to Colorado by the time he was in college. So listen, firstborn children, do you also find it annoying that they go on to have adventures without you? Like you grow up and you leave and then they still do all the things. So one Thanksgiving, I heard this story from my dad first, who called me delighted to tell me the story. He cannot get through the story without just laughing because it's cracking him up so much. And then years later, I talked to my brother about the story and he was a little more like traumatized by it. So there's that, just baseline. So my brother was maybe, 19, 20 years old, and he was traveling from school straight to Thanksgiving dinner. He was like cutting it close, coming in for Thanksgiving to East Texas. And he met a man somewhere along the way, a man with clearly nowhere to go for Thanksgiving and maybe nowhere to go for the night, big jacket, backpack. And my brother just put him in the car and drove him to Henderson, Texas. Which was not where the man was from. And so then this was pre-cell phones, okay, know that. He couldn't give warning that I will not be coming alone to Thanksgiving dinner. He just had to knock on the door at Smith Street, and my mom answered, and there's her, skinny young son and a big burly guy with a backpack, and she doesn't really know what's happening. My mom is a little bit, always been a little bit more formal than the rest of us, and maybe a little bit more fearful than the rest of us. I'm quite sure she thought, this man has a gun to my son's back. I'm getting robbed. This is it. That's not it at all. But also, you need to kind of get the visual that my mom had 1,000 crystal, glass, and china trinkets in her home at all times. And big man, backpack that he cannot be separated from. My mom also was fond of antique furniture, and you do not lounge on a settee. You sit, really gently, right? So big guy trying to sprawl on small furniture with glass items everywhere. I'm sure that my mom was a panicked, nervous wreck the whole time, which my dad was very concerned about at first. Mostly his concern was for my mom, as he tells the story. But then once he realized, there's no harm, no foul. We got enough food. We'll just pull another chair up. Then my dad started to find the whole thing very, very amusing, because my dad is not formal at all. And the introduction of a new variable into family Thanksgiving just cracked him up. So at some point, the two parents find themselves in the kitchen, talking about, is this really happening? Our son brought someone to dinner. And they both start to laugh. And that's when the story turns. And when my dad, shares his delight that he says, well, I was proud of your brother. Just put a pin in that. So then I was talking to my brother earlier in the week. Actually, we were texting and I said, remember that time that you brought somebody for Thanksgiving? Can I just confirm some details on that? And he was not fond of the story. He said, that went bad 3 ways to Sunday. That guy was argumentative, angry, difficult. He was without means at the time and without help and pretty clearly suffering some acute form of mental illness at the time. So he was not easy to deal with. My brother did his best. In his second year of college, just imagine, he's up against, a huge amount of problems that the rest of society couldn't solve, and he's trying to work it out. My brother says at the end, the way that story ends that my parents didn't know is that they're driving back to wherever the guy was from, and they stop at a gas station, and the guy gets out and won't get back in the car. And it's cold, and it's now dark, and the guy won't get back in the car, and my brother finally just had to leave him. So I tell you a very imperfect story about how sometimes your kids grow up to be exactly who you train them to be, and one, it freaks you out, and two, it goes badly. Because we don't get to save each other. We just get to help each other along the journey. That's really like the best you can do. And some days you will be a person who, out of very good intentions, does a thing that goes completely sideways, 3 ways till Sunday, and your people will still see the heart behind why you did it, and they will call your big sister and laugh and laugh and laugh on the phone about how fantastic was the Thanksgiving that Shannon brought home a stranger. My next story is from Johnny Wills. Most of you in the room don't know him, but he was a part of this church really powerfully for a while. He was a trained, ordained Methodist minister who came to us late in his career. He worked for us just as a lay leader. He was not employed or on staff. He had vascular dementia. And ultimately, he passed away from the many diseases that claimed Johnny. But before that, he lived a whole lot of life, and he told some really great stories. And his family has kind of an opposite story from my family's Thanksgiving. His situation is that the people you're with in the room make the thing happen that needs to happen beautifully. And here's how it all went down. Johnny was the first one awake. His young daughter, Hannah, at the time comes in and says, it's Christmas, can we start? And so slowly everybody's getting awake. They haven't even started to open presents, very much still half asleep, and there's a knock at the door. And Johnny looks at his wife, Jennifer, and says, you expected anybody? And when he told the story, when he told the story in this room, he had already started to have some mobility issues and some effects of disease. So Jennifer stood right beside him, and he told the story. He's like, well, what were you thinking? And she would say, I didn't know who it was. And he would say, well, so we opened the door. And there was a man that he had worked with as a street preacher. This is going to factor in later. A man he had worked with named Robert. And he knew Robert pretty well. He knew Robert to be kind of a scruffy dressed person. And here is Robert, like in sort of like the Ron Weasley robes from the formal ball, like a suit, but maybe not exactly like a up to the minute suit, maybe something he found or scrounged or had saved for a really long time. But Robert was clearly changing his normal appearance, making an effort. And as soon as they saw the suit, they knew, oh, he's got to come inside. This is not like a hi, how are you hug at the door. Robert will put on a suit. He's coming in. So they bring Robert in, and the girls just know to play along somehow. They're either so young they don't notice this is odd, or they just play along. And Johnny says, oh, Robert, you've made our day. I'm so glad you came. And Jennifer's meanwhile scrambling like, I was only serving breakfast. I'll figure it out. Give me a second. And Johnny's like, he mostly just drinks coffee. It's going to be fine. So they get Robert a cup of coffee. They sit him down. They don't exchange gifts with him there, but he stays like a good hour. And then when he leaves, he said, well, Johnny, I may have made your day, but you made my year. And then he goes out the door, and on his way out, he gave Johnny a wooden rosary as like a thank you and a Merry Christmas present. And when Johnny told the story, he had the rosary still in his pocket decades later. Because sometimes you make room and it goes just right, and the memory never leaves you. And now we're up to Act 3. For this one, I've got a visual aid. I'm calling this one Always in the Room because I think these last two stories are about noticing what and who is already there or maybe always there. I have one memory from my own childhood, and then I'm going to read a story that's another Johnny Wills episode. It comes from a book that he wrote of like devotionals, 52 devotionals for 52 weeks of the year. So this first one is called Forgotten Gifts. Here's the visual aid. This is a stocking made in 1972. This is my initial. It's not my official stocking. It's my third stocking. if you want to get technical, because my grandmother, my dad's mom, who needle pointed her whole life long, she made me a giant version of this, which went to my own house and held a lot of presents. Then there was another version at my mom's, that grandmother's house. Okay, so that's stocking number 2. This was just the little like appetizer stocking that every child in the family had one. I think I was the 3rd. I'm the 4th grandchild. So by then, Gigi had gotten this down. She made a tiny little stocking to match the giant one, and she hung them in different places around the house. Usually one of 2 spots. And part of the fun was that she wouldn't draw your attention to it. She would just like leave you a little something in your little baby stocking, and you would just find it throughout the day. We visited her on Christmas Eve, and then we'd go back for Christmas Day. Well, one year I forgot the stocking, of course, and interestingly, no one noticed for 12 months. So whatever was in there was real thin and small and flat, evidently. Sometimes there were good gifts. Sometimes it was like lifesavers and, gum, special gum. Sometimes there were gift cards. Once I got a Swatch watch in the mini stocking. That was pretty cool, like circa 1984, 86. That was big. But this year, whatever it was, it sat for 12 months. Because then when I went to open the stocking the next year, there were 2 gifts. And I thought, like, I'm specially beloved. Like, clearly I'm the favorite grandchild. I got 2 gifts. I show this to my grandmother, and she's like, oh, yeah, because you forgot the other one for a whole year, so I just left it there. And then my childhood self turned very sad because I realized, wait, I could have been enjoying gift number 1 for this entire 12 months, and I just did it. I just forgot about it. Then I was nearly inconsolable. I'm going to say this is like circa 8 years old, a lot of feelings being felt. And so my dad, trying to make it better, says, that's no big thing. I sometimes ignore gifts for years on end. And then he goes on to say, like Mama gave me this the other year. I hadn't even opened it yet. Hadn't even opened the package yet. And then Mama, my grandmother, is very offended because her child has not used a gift that she gave him years ago. But, well-intended. If you're picking up on a theme of my family Christmases, you're not wrong. Always well-intended. I really just couldn't be consoled over the idea of something that I forgot and was lost. Even though I got it in the end, and even though it was always there, it was a tough lesson for a little kid. I will say that even well into my 20s, I never stopped checking the mini stocking there every year thereafter. Every year thereafter. And at some point when you have your own children in the world, Gigi stops giving you things and starts giving your kids things. And so for many, many years, the mini stocking was completely empty, and I just checked to be sure, because you never know. You never know, and you don't want to miss anything that was always there for you. Okay, so next, Johnny's story. I think I'm going to read this one so I get his voice captured. I've told you that Johnny was a street preacher, and that's where this Christmas story transpires. I think it was in Beaumont, Texas, if you need a little more context. I stood there on the city street and looked at Dennis. I'm cold, boss man, he said with a smile. It must be 30 degrees tonight. I smiled as I gazed into his brown eyes. I loved this man. He was often on the streets when I made my rounds. He always laughed when he saw me, and he would say, hey, boss man, if you keep doing this kind of thing, I'm afraid one of these bad dudes is going to come get you. Of course, I knew it was possible, but most folks on the street liked me fine. Dennis was just one of many whose names I knew. I know his story, too, a bit of it, and his story was interesting. Dennis suffered, like myself, from mental illness. He had bipolar disorder and a whole host of anxiety difficulties. His parents, I think, were killed in a car accident when he was a boy. He was a big, stout, tough man, tough as an army boot, but there was a softness to him, a kindness that left a favorable and abiding impression on me. As I type these words, I am smiling just remembering Dennis. What a blessing he was. Later in the night, after I made the rounds, I saw him trying to sleep in a sleeping bag I had given him. I knew it was cold, and he had so little, and his vast mental problems kept him out of homes. I cried that night for him because I couldn't stand the thought of his situation. I walked up to the store. I looked at him, and he slowly opened his eyes. And he said, "Boss man, are you worried about me?" No, let me tell you something. Sometimes late at night, when my hope runs low, something good happens. Oh yeah? I asked Dennis, what? And he looked at into my eyes, smiled, and said in a very quiet voice, "Sometimes I look up and I know God is there. Sometimes I'm sure God is with me, and when I ask him to, he sends angels to me. That lets me know it's all going to be good. It's all going to be okay. That's what God be doing. And then I sleep fine." I tried not to tear up anymore, but I did cry a little bit with the hope that he could not tell in the dark of that night. I thought about those words and I said, "Dennis, when you see the angels, what do they look like?" And he said, "Well, right now, like you. Tonight, God sent you." Right in this moment, Johnny writes, I am sitting in a Dairy Queen drinking coffee in New Chapel Hill, Texas. A woman asked me, "You look familiar. Have we met before? I think maybe I know you." I just shrugged and said, "I don't know, ma'am. Probably, maybe. I've been a lot of things." She asked. We exchanged notes. And finally I told her, "Well, I was an angel once. Maybe you know me from that." Maybe you are meant to be someone's angel someday, not their savior. That's not what you were born for, but just an angel in the night. Take the task seriously if it comes to you. Deliver whatever mercy you can. Tell the other person it may not be okay now, but it'll get better. Do whatever you can, even if you have to walk away from someone else's journey or leave them at a place on their own. Always remember that after Jesus came, we are the people God sends.